Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on week 2 of the Low Carbon Design Institute Summer Residency 2022. We're a couple of days away from we're actually a day away from the end of our talks program, which is the first 2 weeks. And I think we're kind of finishing with a bang because today is all about design, and not in a kind of traditional way, but with Ugo Vallauri from the Restart Project. I'm extremely excited about Ugo joining again. Thank you for coming back for the second year in a row on this program. Ugo is co-founder and policy lead of the Restart Project, which is a London-based charity fixing our relationship with electronics by encouraging people to use their electronics longer and collecting and sharing data from community repair initiatives globally on recurring barriers to repair. Restart pushes for legislation for the right to repair in the UK and across Europe. The Restart Project is a founding member of the European Right to Repair campaign, which you can find at repair.eu, a coalition pushing for the universal right to repair, meaning legislation at national and European level requiring manufacturers of all electrical and electronic products to design for repairability, while providing access to independent repairers and the general public to repair manuals, affordable spare parts, and long-term software and security updates. So extremely important work, and I'm so pleased that you're able to join us to share some thoughts with us. So over to you, Ugo.
Great. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for inviting us. It's a pleasure to share and to try to take a little bit of time to step back and reflect about our journey and what it can mean for thinking differently about the way we design and the way we consume and the way we demand more sensible products and services from manufacturers, particularly of electrical and electronic products. I will attempt to share my screen now. Okay. Okay. Can you see everything? Yeah, okay, great. So the Restart Project is a charity and social enterprise based in London, and we try to remind everyone that repair and reuse of products should come first whenever there is a problem, and throwing away, creating waste, and giving up when something simply starts not to work as expected is not a good idea and should be the very last resort. And the reason we do this is because we've lost over time what we call our muscle for repair. We've become very used to just replacing things when they stop working and accepting the built-in obsolescence that unfortunately has been embedded in products. And what I mean by that is not that typical conspiracy theory approach where people think that the day after the warranty of products expires, that's the end and something will happen pre-designed. No, I refer to planned measures taken by manufacturers of products, which make it particularly hard and expensive to take a product apart, or that make spare parts unavailable, or when they do make them available, they might make them available at an extraordinarily high price point, which is designed to make you think twice before actually performing a repair, or planned decisions around when software support is discontinued so that it is highly recommended if you want to continue using a product securely, you should get the next generation. All of this is absolutely planned. And that's what we mean by planned obsolescence. I think it's important to think in these terms, never necessarily the decision or the preference of a product designer associated with a specific product, but decisions of a manufacturer taking into account marketing, sales expectations, and allocation of resources in a way as opposed to another way. But going back to WALL-E, because I hope we can have some fun with all of this. Our frustration is actually also extremely important, our frustration with all of these products. And we, over the course of our time at Restart, always wanted to kind of turn that frustration in something positive. It's very easy to get upset about printers, and I'll come back to printers a little bit later. But it's also important to try to lose this temptation of throwing them off your window on just like giving up, because whatever you've attempted, follow the information in forums or even your favorite YouTuber influencer, and you still can't get it to work properly. So we wanted to channel all of this into something that could help think differently about things. And so I want to celebrate it with you, because it's exactly today, exactly 10 years ago, on a Saturday afternoon on the 16th of June 2012, that we ran our very first Restart party. And I had to put a picture of myself to remind myself that actually I was there trying to fix something with a very willing participant. And at the time, we didn't know what these events would be like. We just tried. But we were driven by the excitement, both of volunteers and of participants. I remember forever the happiness in the face of this person, who I then ran into a few times over the course of the last 10 years in my neighborhood. And every time I just look back at when that 12 o'clock reappeared on a clock, an alarm clock that had stopped working. Unfortunately, the cropping of that picture is a bit unfortunate, because you don't see the repairer that we didn't know, but that arrived that day with a beautiful suitcase of tools. And so that shows already the appetite for repair that we witnessed when we attempted exactly 10 years ago to get started. And it kind of forced us to think about, okay, well, this isn't just a one-off. We need to think about, what does this mean for trying to change the mountains of e-waste that we experience everywhere, and to change the approach to the way we look at repairing, reusing, rather than recycling. So over time, we came up with a much broader vision that puts planet and people at the heart. We call this Restart Futures, and you'll be able to find it on our website in more detail. But basically, looking at how we've lost a lot of the sensible approaches that previous generations had around taking care, maintaining products, actually cherishing and supporting and appreciating those that for a living take care of maintenance of the things we already have. The skills that used to be very common are now still in abundance, but hidden and not shared sufficiently. And we want to change all of that. We would like to see schools that teach repairs. We'd like to see repair everywhere. We'd like to see popular rejection of throwaway products and a move beyond recycling. And some of these things we've started to see a lot more over the last 10 years. Although, of course, there's more challenges that have emerged, as I'll be happy to share. But this very picture, to me, is equally really important, because it's about the intergenerational aspect of repair. It's about how rewiring a plug as well as working on something related to a game console can help bring along a new generation of fixers that can really quickly make the connection between our planetary needs and the convenience of actually getting things that last and being able to keep them in operation for longer. One of our key perspectives has been actually not just focusing on, yes, let's repair, let's make products that last longer, but also really realizing what's the environmental dimension of all of this, and the biggest elephant in the room, which is the way we consume. So it's not just about being more careful about what products we buy, but actually realizing that we've been living in a world where parts of the world, normally most of the global north, simply consumes too much when it comes to electrical and electronic products that have become too cheap for some people to repair. And at the same time, we've just have this desire to click and get the solution to our problems rather than feeling the importance of taking the time to understand why certain things stop working. We need to address this, and we've done it to an extent, and we need to do a lot more of it. Otherwise, we risk that all the current framework around the climate crisis could turn into a gigantic greenwashing machine, where we're just celebrating that it is as easy as ever to buy a secondhand phone, but we don't realize that the reason that there are all of these brand new secondhand phones available at a discounted rate, which I'm happy that one can get secondhand phones, don't get me wrong, but we should ask ourselves the reason, why is it that there's all of these secondhand phones lying out there? And is it probably because there's still a gigantic push by manufacturers as well as providers to sell you yet again another generation, so that then people upgrade and put on platforms or secondhand marketplaces their phone that will be just perfectly fine? I think we haven't sufficiently really come to terms with this aspect, and I'd like to resonate this with you and just get your feedback, because it's one of the biggest challenges we see ahead. And some data that will remind us why I mentioned this is because the amount of electronic waste that we generate, particularly in countries in Europe and in the US, is just not acceptable. This is the latest stats, which are now a little bit old, but show that a country like the UK produces 23.9 kilograms per person of electrical waste per year. That is very, very much. And we're not very good at all at recycling that, which is why we try to concentrate on repair and reuse as a way out of this difficult problem. Of course, we could become better at recycling, and that should happen, but we should become better at reducing the amount of waste that we generate, first and foremost. And in a way, if I step back for a second, it's maybe a bit frustrating as an activist who's worked on this for the last decade to see that we still need to make this point 10 years on. I remember when in the early days we visited a recycling center in London, and we witnessed operatives working there reminding people to smash their old laptop, because that would be the safest way to make sure that no one would ever access their data. And we saw it happening, and it left us gobsmacked because we wonder how many components could actually be reused in that machine. And I'll come back to with a more positive note on that towards the end of the talk. So as part of our journey, we also tried to point to those impacts that are even less visible than the mountain of e-waste that are in the recycling centers in our cities and countries. So looking at the hidden impacts that are related with the mining of materials for the products that we buy, the manufacturing, and the complex procedures that assembling a component for a phone and then the phone itself include, whether it's about the water, the energy, or the actual materials. And I'm happy to use a screenshot of a life cycle assessment from 5 years ago, for the very simple reason that things have not changed at all in that respect in the last 5 years. If you look at the breakdown in terms of greenhouse gas emissions for any phone, really, approximately 80% of all of the impact of that product occurs within the manufacturing stage, while only 17% happens during the use phase, which is to say that the only way we can reduce our impact is indeed by slowing down the way we consume. So we produce educational resources aimed at young people, but also really at everyone, to help come to terms with this. So it's okay to buy secondhand products. It's a great idea, but ultimately we should make sure that all of these products are lasting for much longer and as many people as possible, even in second, third-hand products, continue to benefit and are able to continue to benefit, which is why products, it's essential that they become as repairable as possible and supported for as long as possible. Going back to our events, the history of these events is quite brilliant. We started running them ourselves. Similar communities were already in existence, although not so much focused on electrical and electronics in other parts of the world, notably in the Netherlands, where the Repair Cafe Foundation had started in 2009, so even 3 years before us. And our first parties in London led to workshops on how to run them. And eventually they snowballed into an international movement with a lot of people making the case for repair by taking the time to spend afternoons and at the weekend or long evenings as volunteers helping others fix, or by queuing up and getting a slot to help to get help and trying to repair something that commercially in most cases wasn't supported or even offered anymore as a repair. And so we do have a clear case for how people want to extend the lifetime of products. And we've collected data that we keep mining and analyzing on what are the key barriers of repair. Like, together with partners, we've created an open repair standard. And if any of you wants to learn more about key issues with all kinds of products, I recommend you have a look at it at openrepair.org. We're currently analyzing data about vacuum cleaners, as there is an initiative at EU level to look at the eco-design of these products and how repairability is important. And so we're mining this data set to find the most recurrent faults and what are the key spare parts that should be made available for a long period of time in order to ensure that products last longer. If you look, by the way, at the spread of products, this slide is very packed, but the main point of it is that you see that there's over 30 categories of products that people bring to community repair events. And they go from air conditioner and dehumidifiers to fans. I mean, those are categories that are very relevant in a week like this week. Kettle, lamps, hi-fi integrates, headphones, sewing machines, tablets, vacuum cleaners, one of the most popular indeed, watch, clocks, large home electricals, hair dryers, you name it, food processors. So, and thanks to the great contributions from the Netherlands and Central Europe in general, you see the coffee makers are like incredibly popular at these events. What this means is that for a wide range of these products, for which there's no plan for any regulation to make them more repairable in the near future, there is a lot of frustration and a lot of proof that products fail at a time when people would still like to repair them and keep them in use. So plenty to inspire a change in the way we produce and support products. However, something happened during the course of our life as Restart, that a movement emerged, and we are very happy to be part of it globally, from the United States to Europe, to Australia, to Canada, and elsewhere, to remind us that our right to repair is under threat, and that there are some key issues that prevent us from repairing. And our data definitely helps in making this clear. Spare parts and the affordability of spare parts is a key issue. The availability of proper documentation, including good detailed repair manuals and diagnostics to help diagnose key components, is one. Obviously, the design that makes it very expensive and at times confusing because of the lack of documentation to take products apart, and the use of software increasingly to prevent repair by processes such as part pairing and serialization. I'll say something more on that. All of this is happening and has sparked a great wave of activism, which we've been very happy to be part of. And it's bittersweet because on the one hand, this issue is much more recognized and appreciated. And yet we see, as we are quite embedded in all the developments that are happening in policy terms, we see it necessary, but extremely slow. One example is indeed printers. I promise you we will come back to printers. We've launched in 2019 a European Right to Repair campaign, which you can find at repair.eu, and now has 100 member organizations from 21 countries and is pushing European institutions primarily on right to repair, but also trying to highlight exciting developments that are happening at country level, for example. And this is why it's relevant for people in the UK, as well as in Norway and Switzerland, as well as those 27 EU member states. Because at one level, there's a legitimate fear of missing out and some opportunities to change the game at national or regional level. But also there are some issues that cannot be tackled by anyone smaller than a single market the size of the European Union, for example. Printers is one such case. Up until last year, printers was a field that was dominated by a so-called voluntary agreement, which means that manufacturers were asked by the European Commission to come up with an agreement on next milestones for sustainability of these products. And in the latest iteration of such voluntary agreement, they dared to propose that no spare parts, apart from a power supply, would need to be provided for products that cost less than 350 euros. So that means that the vast majority of consumer printers that most of us still have at home, reluctantly probably, wouldn't be covered. And we campaigned against this, and we were able to finally get the EU to reject this with a campaign called Long Live the Printer. And now the EU is looking at creating a mandatory regulation for any printer manufacturers that want their future printers to be brought and sold in the EU. But the word slow, keep that in mind because we're in the very early days, but it shows a trend. What we want at European level, but the same is true in the UK, is that products should have a good design and that everyone should have fair access to parts as well as to the information, and that the designs shouldn't include the use of materials such as adhesives whenever a simple screw could do the job. And we want consumers to be informed and empowered. Because this can help make a much better decision making. And you know, often manufacturers actually behind the scenes get in touch and ask us, so what should we do? And of course, Restart would like to retain its independence and wouldn't want to be seen as endorsing an individual product from a much larger manufacturer that is doing all kinds of other things with the other products. But we say one thing you can do is be transparent. Explain why you have certain compromises. Why is it that that product is less repairable than I would have liked? Why is it that you built it in a certain way? Let's have a conversation. That could be a starting point so that everyone can be more informed and better equipped to make up their own mind. So in Europe, there's quite a lot going on at the moment. One thing, I'll put it there because it reminds you, aside from repair per se, it's an important aspect of how single markets, like larger markets, can push for simplifying ecosystems. And it's the universal charger that you probably heard, that USB-C is becoming finally a standardized piece of equipment that will reduce the unnecessary production and disposal of chargers of other natures in the near future. We are working and lobbying for truly ambitious regulations on tablets and smartphones, and we are eagerly awaiting for a draft European regulation in the next few weeks, which should include both a range of spare parts available that by law will need to be made available to everyone, and a larger set that should be available particularly to professional repairers, as well as we hope, but of course the devil is always in detail, so we'll have to see, a commitment to longer term software support for all these products, so that it is not okay to stop software and security updates after just 2 years. Then there's more products for which the EU is looking at creating regulation, such as laptops, vacuum cleaners, and the printers that I mentioned. We put a question mark there because printers, we know the process is only starting, but we are concerned when it actually might come to fruition. But we know that there's other aspects that are unlikely to be tackled, or that are simply too slow to be tackled on a product by product basis. And so there's interesting patterns that are emerging that should inform also reactions from the design community in coming years. One of them is a battery legislation that is not only about repair, it's also about resource use in general, but includes potentially really exciting provisions on battery replaceability, ensuring that all consumer products should have batteries that are replaceable by the users, like it used to be, like it's not the case with earbuds and the likes, for example. And then there are other approaches, again, on horizontal measures, which could be useful in pushing the markets towards more repairable and longer lasting products. One aspect is requiring warranties to be longer, legal warranties, or simply mandating that all products of beyond certain size or value should have at least the key spare parts and the repair documentation available for X number of years, irrespective of the product type. We know that warranties is a contested territory also because it wouldn't necessarily lead to more repair, but it could lead to more mindless replacing if legislation isn't written in the right way. But anyway, something to think about if you think from the perspective of a designer or of a manufacturer of the future. What's the relationship that we have with these products? Can we think about a longer lasting relationship, and what does it imply in terms of the way we frame the provision of products and services, and the way communication and more empathy really in the needs and the frustrations that users of products experience. And then there's some other promising policies. You certainly have heard of the French Repair Index, which some players claim is already shifting company practices internationally, if nothing else, so that for certain products, making a repair manual available on a website might increase the score of that product in France and potentially its perception as a more repairable product globally. At European level, there is one similar index in development. Initially might be attached to regulation on smartphones and tablets. We'll all have more information on that in coming weeks. But there is also a risk that the cost of repair isn't successfully addressed by such an index, differently from how the French have taken into account the cost of spare parts as one component. And specifically on affordability, there is very promising approaches coming up, particularly in Austria, where now a nationwide scheme allows anyone to claim 50% off for one repair per year up to the cost of 200 euros, simply to reduce unnecessary waste and to foster a more thriving repair economy. And while we are concentrating on Europe, there's interesting news coming from New York State, where the first right to repair legislation has finally passed, and we're still making sense of what will be the consequences in future policy developments across the US and globally. So there's a lot going on, definitely. And just a reminder, the level of support for this, aside from the community repair interest, is huge. 8 out of 10 people in Europe. And we did do a poll in towards the end of 2021 in the UK, specifically asking whether the public wanted the UK government to commit to adoption of regulation for smartphones and tablets and laptops, something that there hasn't been any commitment on aligning with the EU. And you see the level of support is exactly in line, 81%. And significantly from our perspective, the vast majority of people, this is specifically a follow-up question to people that were in favor, are indeed saying that consumers and community repair initiatives should have the same level of access to official spare parts and repair information as professional repair shop, because this is still contentious and imperfect in any implementation at European level. A reminder indeed, as mentioned before, but I'd like to keep saying it because there's been a lot of excitement about right to repair, and the media gets excited whenever there is a little vote in one committee at the European Parliament. Everyone thinks that it's the end of planned obsolescence. It's really not the case. Every development, it goes, sure, in the right direction, but it's very, very slow. One example is the unified USB-C charger that everyone was raving about last week. Included in the approved regulation is a clause that postponed by 40 months, in addition to the 2 years, the entering of this legislation for laptops. So it will be only in 2027 that manufacturers will be required to make the unified charger mandatory for all laptops in the EU, which means that the lobby of manufacturers is still doing quite strong, irrespective of all the excitement about right to repair. To summarize the challenges that we're seeing, there's a huge amount of industry pushback. There's also lack of resources, even like people in the European Commission to actually handle these processes in a smooth way, to speed them up. The cost of repair has not yet been addressed by any of these legislatory approaches. Different tools are needed to address different problems. Consumer rights regulation is not the same as the eco-design regulation. And so there's different frameworks that need to come together to address from all perspectives our desire and right to repair. And increasingly, I mentioned it earlier, the use of software by manufacturers to potentially prevent us from repairing. So one level of this is, as I mentioned, the fact that many products require software to operate, and if software is no longer supported and an open alternative isn't in existence or allowed embedded on a device, the product can become no longer safe to use, secure to use rather, and it can be an implicit push to stop using it and replace it. But there's more worrying developments, and some of you will have heard of manufacturers like Apple finally making spare parts available to an extent in the US for now. And when people attempt to perform a repair using it, then they realize that at the very, very end of the process, someone needs to get on the phone with authorized third party to verify that the serial number of your device is paired with the serial number of the spare part that you bought. And only by doing that, you will retain all the functionality of that part. It might not sound like a big deal, but what this means is that we're potentially moving to a world where reusing a spare screen from a recovered device independently, or creating a more affordable market for third-party spare parts that can keep in operation products when a manufacturer stops to support them directly could become very challenging. So we're looking for ways to address this also from a legal perspective, because we might be in a situation where this move to the much lauded circular economy could reap big benefits for manufacturers that prevent you from using other sources of spare parts, for example, and could lead to near monopolies, which are never beneficial when it comes to reducing the costs of repair, which were one of the key problems to begin with. So it's bittersweet, and it shows some of the pushes ahead that we need to make. We do have a right to repair petition specifically for the UK that's ongoing, and that also looks exactly at the issue of costing and how VAT removal from repairs could be one way to reduce these costs. You're definitely invited to support it if you see fit. But I also wanted to close this talk looking at like a bit beyond and a bit about what's the future. I wanted to share this picture of a friend of Restart, Matthew, who is living in Uganda as a refugee from Sudan, and he's bringing repair to informal settlements and communities in his proximity, and sharing the importance of repair, not just for us who can still access some official repair services at times, but for everyone that doesn't really have an alternative very frequently. And so we should not really concentrate too much about our beautiful world of being able to access a community repair event, a restore party, a repair cafe to get help, but to see the global dimension of all of this. So changes in legislation in Europe could lead eventually to a change in the provision and the availability of spare parts elsewhere as well. And simply banning throwaway products would really help reduce cases of solar lamps are completely non-repairable entering the market of sub-Saharan Africa, for example. But also we need to look ahead and look at what's next in terms of making repair even more obvious and even more of a proof of the future that we need. One of the projects that we are proudest of that we are just launched as we embark in our second decade is the fixing factories. These are spaces where permanent attempts at bringing repair to broader fruition and linking the connections between opportunities to reduce electrical waste with increased opportunities to train people up, show pathways for a repair economy to exist, and reskilling our communities. We have one in a waste facility in Brent that's looking at addressing the digital access for people that don't yet have access to a laptop and might benefit from a laptop that was previously supposed to go into a recycling bin. And we are very much looking forward to the launch later this year of one fixing factory in a high street in Camden, trying to basically make the connection between our directory of professional repair businesses, reliable repair businesses, and our pop-up repair events more obvious and visible every day in our streets, so that everyone can get advice and learn how best to save things from going to landfill. And one announcement that I think it's not been made yet, so you're the first to know, that at the end of September, we will be throwing our next FixFest International. It's a global gathering for community repair. So if anyone is really keen, you should keep an eye on FixFest coming up, as it's a great opportunity to connect community repair, the right to repair campaigners, and people that repair on a daily basis. And I think I spoke too much, and I'll